Canada hosted the G7 foreign ministers meeting and they invited 4 of the 6 founding countries of BRICS. Are we trying to join BRICS? Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Canada hosted the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Niagara on the Lake. And it wouldn't have been much to it. Like, it would have been kind of inconsequential, except for the French foreign minister came there trying to talk all kinds of stuff against Donald Trump and his attempt to, stop the Venezuelans from importing narcotics into the United States of America. On top of that, Anita and invited Brazil, India, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia, 4 of the 6 founding members of the BRICS organization, an organization whose sole intent is to take the economy away from the American dollar, the American economy being larger than the next 4 underneath them put together. They want to remove that strength of the American dollar because somehow in their mind that's not going to trigger a global recession or even depression. Of course, only Russia and China weren't invited. At the same time as inviting all of these founding BRICS members, they spoke out against how they wanted to put more sanctions against Russia because those have worked so well so far. I think that we need to look at a little bit of the things that are coming out of this G7 foreign ministers meeting. I want to highlight the idea that one of these countries are cracking down on their people. One of these countries in these 4 that we're talking about are actively pursuing genocide. The other one of these countries is a repressive government from way back. And then that leaves India, where the Canadian government themselves say that they are actively pursuing policing actions on top of our soil. Now, when China does it, it doesn't bother them. But when India does it, they go ahead and get upset about it. I cannot see how the Liberal government tells themselves that they are the government of the people when they go ahead and get in bed with some of the most reprehensible governments on the face of the earth, all the while telling themselves that the capitalist government is the problem. I want to show you something that one of the things that the French foreign minister is upset about and how it's interesting that Donald Trump has decided to double down in his involvement in the Caribbean. Let's get into this. Before we get into that, though, let's start at the beginning. So here's a joint statement for the G7 foreign ministers meeting in the Niagara region in Canada. The statement itself is sort of interesting. We, the G7 foreign ministers of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, United States of America, and the high representatives of the EU met under Canada's G7 presidency on Niagara, November the 11th to 12th. We welcomed participants of the foreign ministers of Brazil, India, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Republic of Korea, South Africa, Ukraine, who joined us for a discussion on maritime security, prosperity, critical minerals, economy resilience, and energy security. Now, all of those things, of course, are the things that they're trying to put in place to stop the behemoth that is the United States of America. All of them, every last one of them will be talking about maritime security. That's because Donald Trump is blowing up them ships coming out of Venezuela. Critical minerals, Donald Trump is at least a year ahead of them. They're just too slow out of the blocks for that. Economic resilience, well, if you really want to get economically resilient, you have to change your position, your tactic. The way that you're going about it is not any good. For Canada, I mean, the rest of them seem, well, maybe not so much Germany and France, but many of the other countries I just listed are doing it their own way. They're following the model of Donald Trump. Mexico has a greater GDP than Canada does, if you can imagine that, because of the actions of both governments, right? I mean, Canada would surpass them, except for we have, of course, the Liberal government who hates prosperity. For us, they don't mind it for themselves and their close personal friends, the inner circle of 100 people. But for you and I, the millions of Canadians, they don't want prosperity. Now, what I really think is hilarious about this, though, is Ukraine's long-term prosperity, security, and defense. And if you come down a little bit, about halfway down, it goes, we are increasing the economic costs to Russia, exploring measures against countries and entities that are helping finance Russia's war efforts. Well, that's interesting because many of the countries you just listed off are members of the BRICS, and they're all helping to fund Russia's war efforts. They're buying much of Russia's oil. I mean, Russia's selling all kinds of oil inside of Africa. You don't hear the Canadian government saying anything about that. Don't get me started on the situation in India with the Russian oil. Certainly not going to get me talking about the way that China is the number one ally of Russia. So how does that work inside of the mind of the G7 foreign minister, Anita Anand? Do we see here that there's just no way in the world that the policies of the foreign ministry inside of Canada and Mark Carney by extension are just not going to work? There's so many contradictions. Either their words, they don't mean them, or if they do mean them, they have no idea what they're talking about. There's nowhere in the middle that we can say there's anything other than incompetence. Doesn't matter which side of the coin you want to come at it from. If it was a mistake, incompetent. If they're trying to mislead us, that's incompetent. So there's not anything in there that we can find that tells us that we can, feel a lot of security when we talk about the Liberal government going into negotiations with some of these countries who are deeply embedded with the Russian economy. And somehow that's going to benefit Canada and that's going to benefit Ukraine. Some of the other topics they were touched on is the peace in the Middle East. That's kind of a weird thing. Regional security and prosperity across the Indo-Pacific. Again, that's a direct challenge to China. Haiti, who I'm not even sure that we're still doing anything. Sudan, which is easily one of the most horrendous genocides that's happening. A complete and total lack of response from the government on Sudan is kind of very, very strange in my mind, from a government that will lose their mind if somebody says the wrong word on the internet. Meanwhile, when people who are part of a certain ethnic group in Sudan are being targeted by the tens of thousands, crickets. Again, I have no room in my world, in my mind, in my governmental view for Canada of a country that is governed by people who will not treat all situations equally, who will not treat all situations if it's bad in doing it in one situation, it's bad doing it in another situation. And if you're picking and choosing, then you are not the government for me. You are not the leadership that this country or this planet needs. So another interesting one is the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And of course, now they want to talk about migration, maritime security, and prosperity, which is very strange in my head, how we've already had all kinds of migration. How come that migration over the last 10 years, 15 years even, has not resulted in prosperity for these countries? I thought that was the idea. I thought all these military-age men were supposed to be creeping across the world because they were looking for ways to enrich their homeland, because they were looking for ways to send money back to their homeland. How come it is their homelands are still in total shambles? How come it is that we're inviting governments to this country in an effort to solve these problems and we're doing nothing about it? I mean, Haiti, Sudan, Eastern Democratic Republic. These countries are in shambles and we're doing nothing but a bunch of little bit of a talk. We are, however, being very upset that Donald Trump is stopping all kinds of narcotics leaving Venezuela. Am I the only one that thinks, wow, that is absolute contradiction in terms? They don't make any sense to me. There are defenseless people in these countries who are being targeted, harmed, and permanently damaged. By contrast, all Donald Trump did was say, I'm going to put America first. And the whole far left took a complete and total meltdown over Donald Trump and has no problem with the other stuff. And whenever I hear the far left talking, if they were being honest, if they were being straightforward, in my opinion, the opposites would be true. They wouldn't care what Donald Trump is doing because he's looking after his own, and they would be caring about all these people in these various regions who are being targeted by, what can only be called repressive governments and horrible situations. And our Canada right there leading the way, saying absolutely nothing in Niagara on the Lake or in the joint statement they released. Since they brought up Ukraine, which of course by this point is just a farce, Ukraine's justice and energy ministers resigned amid ongoing corruption probe. The justice minister and the energy minister. It's not one ministry. It's two separate entities, two separate ministers who are being charged with corruption. Justice and energy. The same problems that we seem to be having in Germany, France, Italy, Greece, Canada, England, Sweden. I mean, there's a theme going on here. It seems to me that everywhere you turn and you find a left-wing government, there is a problem with energy and with justice. In this case, they're talking about how they were taking bribes. I'm not sure who they were taking bribes from. I'm not sure what kind of corruption we're talking about. All I know is that this guy, Mr. Zelensky, who ever since he's become president in that time of war, has managed to buy not one, but 2 yachts and 3 or 4 houses. So I'm not sure how he's making that kind of money. Nonetheless, he's asked 2 of his hand-picked ministers, right? There was no election when he picked these guys. He just went, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And in January, just as Donald Trump was telling them that they weren't going to get any more money if they're not going to play ball, he reshuffled it, pushed a couple of people out, brought in a couple of new people. But in absolute, there's no democratic elections in Ukraine. The first thing that Zelensky did once he took power was to abolish all other political parties under the guise of emergency. And here we want to send them money. Well, of course, it's strange that the liberals want to send them money, but they want to send them our money while our food prices are through the roof, while our energy prices are through the roof, while our crime stats are through the roof, while all of the problems we have in this country and all the G7 can be talking about, or the foreign ministers in Canada can be discussing, is how we need to be sticking our nose in a war that's rooted in over 1,000 years of angst and anger halfway around the world. Okay, let's mention Venezuela, because the G7 members mentioned Venezuela, the French foreign minister using the Canadian media, the left-wing propaganda media, who the more they go after Pierre Poilievre, the more I know I'm right about the support that I have for Pierre Poilievre. They went after him still over this floor crossing while they ignore Erskine Smith. I will cover it in another video because he completely, Pierre Poilievre shuts down the media well, when I think about the way that he shuts down the media, I think excellent work. And then I think that's exactly what Donald Trump does to the media. And I want a leader who's not afraid to tell the media the truth, because the media is not telling us the truth. Nonetheless, I'll get to that in another story. Right now, I want to talk about the Venezuela situation. Now, the Venezuelan military is preparing a guerrilla response in case of a U.S. attack. Somehow in their head, they think that the Americans are going to put, I don't know, Marines on the ground and come in and take over the capital city or something. That's not going to happen. It'll be more like they did it in Libya. There might be some missiles flying into the country. There will absolutely be American air cover. Then they will do their best. Unlike Libya, they won't make the same mistakes. They will, find the people that are on the ground that are very unhappy, and they will assist them in overthrowing the government. The Americans are very good at it. Long before the far left and Obama made a big mess of it, and the Americans have successfully overthrown lots of governments. If you just go back before, let's call it 1990, the way that they would do it, when they would use different organizations. You go in, then you send in the guns. I mean, there's a blueprint for it, no doubt about it. Especially when they're dealing with a country like Venezuela, or many of the Central American, Southern American countries. However, it's funny that the Venezuelan military is trying to make it seem like the Americans are going to put boots on the ground. Venezuela is deploying weapons, including decades-old Russian-made equipment, and is planning to mount a guerrilla-style resistance to sow chaos in the event of a U.S. air or ground attack, according to sources with knowledge of the efforts and planning documents seen by Reuters. The approach is a tacit administration of the South American country's shortage of personnel and equipment. I won't go too far into the article from there. I wanted you to hear the way that they're trying to frame the message right now. All of a sudden, this horrible 20-year dictatorship who makes mock elections and puts his people, disappears many of the resistance to his government, is all of a sudden some sort of a resistance fighter. There's some sort of Che Guevara, Castro, I'm not sure, maybe even Mao in their minds that they might be talking about. But he's a hardcore dictator who gets a lot of his money smuggling illegal narcotics into the United States of America. And many parts of his country are in abject poverty with people that are extremely unhappy with the governance. But because he's a dictator, they can do nothing about it. And Reuters wants you to think that for some reason, they want you to think that they're, standing up to the oppressor. It's very, very weird. I picked this up from the CBC. All links will be in the description. French foreign minister at G7 meeting in Canada says U.S. boat strikes violate international law. Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada's foreign and defense ministers, have yet to publicly comment on the strikes. Well, I think that Prime Minister Mark Carney has made a statement by inviting Brazil, India, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia to the G7 foreign ministers meeting, and standing shoulder to shoulder with the French foreign minister as he condemns the attack of the United States on smuggling happening in international waters. And somehow the French foreign minister feels that he has control of those international waters. I guess he thinks France is in charge of international waters, despite the fact that they're called international for a specific reason. And what appears to be the most significant condemnation so far from a G7 ally, France's foreign minister says the deadly boat strikes carried out by the United States in the Caribbean since early September violate international law. I'm not sure that those two things go together, international law. There's a lot of things that happen outside the boundaries of a particular country's naval boundaries that cannot be prosecuted in any way, shape, or form. But I don't believe that you're going to be, what are you trying to tell me now? That you're going to be trying to bring Donald Trump to The Hague? Is that the idea? Is that the idea, Mr. French foreign minister? And how is it that we as the Canadian government can allow that kind of discussion to go on our soil? How are we allowing these people into the Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is about 8 minutes from the border with the United States of America, this country that is, shares our longest natural undefended border in the world. And we want to allow enemies of Donald Trump onto our property. And then we want to allow them access to our press so that they can fan the flames of propaganda, somehow trying to convince you now, all of a sudden, that the smugglers are the victims. Can you imagine the twistedness inside of the mind that told themselves that this made perfect sense? And then the CBC wonders why nobody listens to them. All right, one of the problems that they are having with Donald Trump is that he has elected to sail an aircraft carrier group into the Caribbean islands to stop I don't know what his reasons are, but I know that he's decided to sail one into the Caribbean, and it's got everybody all upset. And I just want to show you this clip before I comment on it.
It's over 330 meters in length, with 4,500 sailors on board. The world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is the latest arrival in the Caribbean. A U.S. naval build-up off the coast of Venezuela is raising tensions in the region. The Trump administration says it's preparing for an anti-drug offensive, deploying warships, submarines and fighter jets near the Venezuelan coast. With heavy U.S. military presence at its shores, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signed a defense law on Tuesday calling for military readiness.
If we as a republic, as a people, have to take up arms to defend this sacred legacy of our liberators, we are ready to win.
Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino claims to have rallied 200,000 armed forces to participate in military exercises to counter what he calls imperial threats. Meanwhile, neighbor Colombia also denounced Donald Trump's military buildup in the region, calling for an investigation into Trump's war crimes, which it says has affected citizens of Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Trinidad and Tobago. Its president, Gustavo Petro, ordered his security forces to stop sharing intelligence with the U.S. until U.S. strikes on suspected drug traffickers cease.
All levels of law enforcement intelligence are ordered to suspend all communications and other dealings with U.S. security agencies.
Since September, U.S. forces have targeted about 20 vessels in international waters, killing over 75 people, according to U.S. figures. Trump recently downplayed the prospect of going to war with Venezuela, yet has warned that President Maduro's days are numbered.
What kind of bizarre world are we living in where the media is trying to defend the narco dictator? I mean, where are we? Have we gone completely over the edge? Are we now in bizarro world? Have we come to the final days? I mean, what are we talking about when I hear the media from around the globe trying to defend the narco dictator who's completely oppressing his people? Everybody's aware of it. Amnesty International, all these organizations have something to say on it. And yet here we see that they are so obsessed with stopping the Americans from making America the strongest economy that they will completely ignore the rules of right and wrong. They will completely ignore all of the things that point to, peace and security in a desperate attempt to try to turn any of the Americans against Donald Trump. And I don't know why they would do that. Their prosperity that they're currently experiencing is beyond, it's generational, to take a word from the Liberal government and from Mark Carney. They are getting all kinds of money into their pockets. Some of the states that didn't decide that they were going to participate, well, they're looking over the fence saying, geez, I wonder why all them other states are making so much money. However, that's neither here nor there. What I see is the world's media and whoever's in control of the world's media. And that's, just done through a little bit of stockholder here and stockholder there. You just buy up some of the stock and then you have control of the media organization. They're trying to send this message that the oppressive Venezuelan government is the victim, not the people that live under this oppressive government and the freedom that they are staring down at, and the hope and the joy that they're holding on to. And when they hear whatever they might hear, but when they hear that Donald Trump's got the American military on their side. And yet here we see on the far left that they are just so down the rabbit hole. They are so deep in the Kool-Aid. They just hate so much prosperity and freedom and independence that they will throw the people of Venezuela and Colombia and all the other countries that you heard mentioned completely to the lions, rather than give them prosperity and freedom and choice and freedom of enterprise and all the other things, so that they can see their own vision of this country, of this world materialize, when they see the only thing that's in the way right now is the behemoth of the economy of the United States of America. The same economy that can sail the world's largest aircraft carrier. Did you hear them stats? 330 meters. That's 3 1/3 football fields. Rough. Let's just call it 3 football fields, laid end on end on end, with 4,500 military personnel on it. And don't think it stops there. If you look back at the video, you'll see one of the battleships that sail along with it, which are one of the best in the history of mankind. Everybody's aware of that. I believe, if I remember correctly, they carry each one of those ships, not the aircraft carrier itself, though you saw that it has all kinds of fighter jets on it. So I'm not sure that you need much more than that. Nonetheless, there is, it's called an aircraft carrier group, right? So it has frigates, it has supply ships, it has small boats to fight off. It has all kinds of, it's a group. And one of the ships that you saw in the shot it carries 15, if I remember right, 15 Tomahawk missiles by itself. 15 intercontinental ballistic missiles that can be fired from hundreds, thousands of kilometers away. And this is all sailing down to intercept any of the narco trade that might be happening out of the South America in this case, because that's where Venezuela is, going into the southern part of the United States. Do you think that there's anyone in the United States right now that's not cheering for the success of this flotilla? Do you believe in your mind that there's anyone who is not part of the Maduro regime who is not cheering for the success of this flotilla? And here we have our propaganda, our media, and our government rooting for its failure. I just don't know. How can you even tell yourself that? Come on, man, come on. What kind of country have we become? How did we tell ourselves that these were the leaders we were looking for? To me, it's a shocking turn of events that we are not down there saying, you know what, we only got 15 kayaks, but we're willing to sail them down with you to help dislodge this horrible dictator, and all of the things that go along with that. No, instead, we're deciding that we're going to get in bed with bricks, and we're going to make stories that make seem like the dictator is the victim of this story. And that's what propaganda looks like, guys. That has no ethics and no scruples. It simply tries to tell you a story that they want you to believe, no matter what the reality on the ground is. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.